Cool. So, um, really thank you for Columbia Blockchain Club for inviting me here. I'm Illia, co-founder of Near. My background is actually in AI, but kind of through twists and turns, end up realizing that there's a lot to build in blockchain space, and we started Near in actually 4 years ago in August 2018. And our kind of high level mission has been to remove barriers to Web3 because Web3 has a lot of promise. And, I think at this point, people have been talking about it for, over 10 years, and different properties of like open web were even available before. But we're still having a lot of kind of limitations on how people actually adopting it, building on it, using it. And so for us, it's really important. How do we actually remove those barriers and onboard users, right? And so our goal, kind of the way we measure our success, is kind of to get to 1 billion users within 5 years. So we are about 2 years in since launch of mainnet, and still obviously a lot of work to do. Now, the way we do it is by building kind of not just infrastructure, but the whole ecosystem in a way that is simple to build and use, that is secure, scalable, and sustainable. Now, kind of I mentioned, billion users. So we are actually had a 30x growth in past year, and I think just getting to 20 million users on chain. So we pretty good growth. We need like a couple more years of this, and we're gonna be where we need to be. So overall, it's been a really amazing year. There's kind of across the board, 5 to 10x growth, like active developers, projects. And really kind of for anyone who wants to build a startup, a really important thing we look at is how much funding has projects that are building on Near have attracted. And so year to date, actually over $300 million already were invested in startups on Near. Now, let's kind of look at the bigger picture. If you're familiar with open source, right, the kind of at the core of any open source project, right, there's some, source code, some project on GitHub or whatever. But the reality is it's a lot more about the people and kind of all of the kind of usage of this project than about specific code, right? Code continues change, new features, new things, new approaches. And similarly here, there's a Near protocol that at the core of the kind of Near ecosystem. It is, what nodes run, what kind of sends, like validates transactions. But at the same time, more importantly, it's all the people and organizations in the ecosystem that are kind of making sure that this ecosystem continues to grow. And so we actually recently kicked off a process to set up a governance for the whole ecosystem, which is called Near Digital Collective, that is kind of designed to coalesce the whole ecosystem and make decisions, especially hard decisions, which are kind of not always clear how how they will affect different stakeholders, kind of have a body that is able to do this. And I have a pretty long talks about this and kind of possible structures of how this can work. Now, I mentioned on the bottom, there's a lot of infrastructure, right, that layers on top of the protocol, right? This is everything to kind of get data, analytics, feed data into on chain, as well as programming kind of SDKs that allow developers to build new applications. Now, there's a really cool thing that actually has just been announced last week called Calimero, which allows to run private shards. So I'll talk about sharding in general, but what this allows to do is actually for a company, a DAO, even a university to run its own kind of shard of Near without revealing all of the data to the public blockchain, right? So, for example, the AMM was discussed before, could have been run as well on something like this, pretty much hiding exact state of the contract and transactions while still providing exactly the same security guarantees to the users. The other use case would be, getting your certificate actually authenticated by a private shard of university, and then being able to prove to anyone that your GPA is 4.0 without revealing your full transcript, right? So cases like this are really powerful. Now, on top of it is kind of what we call app infrastructure, right? It's not just about like all this backend, it's also how do we turn the user experience into such a way that users don't need to think about blockchain. And so there's been a lot of work in near ecosystem on how do we remove kind of barriers to entry. One of which I want to mention is Aurora Plus is removing need to pay for transaction fees when you're interacting with the blockchain, right? And think of it as a subscription model, right? You right now not paying per byte when you're sending traffic with your internet provider, you're just paying per month, and kind of the provider covers all of the actual expenditures on infrastructure. So Aurora Plus, and there's more things coming, and I'll talk about this. Now, we are about scaling. And so it's not just about scaling the infrastructure, it's also scaling the presence and go to market. And so we have a lot of different organizations in the ecosystem that are actually focused to help projects across the ecosystem. And I'll talk more about this later. And at the top, kind of the three major verticals in kind of Web3 are finance, creativity, kind of creative economy, and social. Finance, I think, is pretty clear at this point that we know what's a kind of product market fit here. The creative side has been, growing over the past 2 years. There's been a lot of good experiments, and the kind of the enablement of not just creators themselves, but also kind of the whole ecosystem around them, the fans, is kind of pretty disruptive, which means, we see kind of a lot more of this launching over time. And at the same time, all those creators, they create a community around them, right? Which is kind of core part of social. And so we see now more and more social applications as well, kind of becoming mature. One of the things that just to call out is actually niche, which is a way to create sub communities that are enabled by NFTs, right? So let's say you have an NFT from some artist, maybe the artist themselves using a minter, which is kind of an Instagram with NFTs. And so you can have you can be in a micro community with other people who are also kind of fan of this artist and have like their own feeds and communications there. So you can actually build a very composable applications. Now, let's talk about scaling. And kind of, if you're familiar with blockchain, there's a lot of approaches that are out there. And people call them all kinds of different words. There's zones, there's subnets, there's parachains, rollups. Kind of different blockchains choose different name and like a little bit adjusted paradigm. But at the end, kind of at the core of it, like if you're coming from building web applications, if you're coming from like systems design, it's all variants of sharding, and you're just solving for some set of security problems and kind of communication problems around the infrastructure. So the way to scale, right, anything is to run more computers that doing work in parallel, right? That's a pretty obvious statement. And so the kind of the approaches here that people have taken, a lot of them are about separating layers of kind of the security and settlement from the execution, because it's simpler, because it's easier to build that. And kind of this is a like an analogous to this is, when PCs and Macs were just starting, Mac was kind of a one box that was like delivered and you could not customize it. And PCs were where you had a lot of different vendors trying to build different kind of new innovative ways, like faster RAM, better hard drives. What happens is, as this R&D kind of matures, something like Mac, Apple end up winning because they can actually take all of that R&D and integrate it into one solution and build a better experience in an integrated way versus a lot of kind of different vendors trying to hodgepodge into one computer. And so similar thing is happening here. We have a lot of kind of innovative ways, to be clear, that people are trying to scale, trying to solve these problems, but what they lead to is drop in performance and latency and really bad UX, right? Like if you think of, having a lot of different rollups, and you need to understand which rollup you have fees to pay on, which application is on, how long does it settle, like is it going to settle, like is there going to be rollback, like all the stuff now is moved to a user side. And so from our perspective, the way to scale, the way to actually deliver value is to have an integrated blockchain. There's some, design isolation, obviously, but uh, that from a user and developer perspective that kind of interacting with the blockchain do not need to understand how it runs underneath, right? It can just run. Like similarly how, you don't go to Google or Facebook and it will tell you like, oh, we actually have already 1 million users right now active. We cannot take you on, wait for a bit. So the way we've approached this is by pretty much kind of pushing all the way, right? So we actually on a underlying level think of every account and a contract, which are the same on Near, to be its own shard, its own chain, its own rollup, call it whatever you want. And so when you do that, what you realize is two things. One is you need to batch them, so for efficiency, because we have like 20 million of them now, and so if you have 20 million shards, you need like 200 million computers, and you need to make the cross communication right between these contracts as efficient and as kind of seamless as possible. And so, but what it allows you to do is actually continuously grow and rearrange the network without users or developers kind of observing what changed. So you can actually like move contracts between physical shards like these batches without user thinking about it, right? Like imagine if your account pretty much moves from Ethereum to Polygon, right? Like that kind of level, but you as a user don't need to think about it. Like it just happens and like fees are just staying low. So we've actually been at it for a while and we still have some ways to go. The kind of final phase, we call it dynamic resharding, where this is happening completely automatically by the chain based on the usage, based on kind of patterns of the execution. But we didn't need that when we were just launching. So we launched with 1 shard. We actually resharded to 4 shards without changing anything on the user developer experience. And then 2 days ago, we launching chunk-only producers, which is expanding number of validators. So this is where like the phase that we are right now is going away from like each node validating all of the shards to having chunk-only producers, which are kind of each tracking only one of the shards. So like actually scaling. And so this allows us to go for more validators, have, these validators need actually less powerful hardware. And this is pretty much, the way to increase capacity without needing to have bigger computers. Next phase will be going away from needing to have these block producers who are still tracking all shards. And this is really a security measure to make sure that while all this being rolled out, we still have some validators that observe the full state and they can kind of prevent malicious state transition. With the next stage, the challenges and some of the other mechanics will be introduced to make sure that even if there's nobody ever observes the full state, we still have kind of the same security of the blockchain. And so that is where the number of shards can continue growing because now no node need to actually have full state, which will be pretty different from pretty much every other blockchain kind of running right now. So this is all great, right? But the whole point of all of this sharding is to not need to think about it. Like as developer, you don't need to think about this. As a user, you're just using blockchain. It's all happening underneath. That's the whole point. Like this transitions, as they happen, they don't change anything on the experience level. The things that we are focused on, though, is how do we make the building on this as easy as enjoyable, and also as kind of easy to onboard new users for developers as well. And so we've started pretty early on with realization that a kind of cryptographic addresses are really not user-friendly. I think everybody knows that 0x something something is probably not the most understandable thing for 7 billion people on planet Earth. And so Near accounts are kind of named, they follow a domain name pattern. So Illia.near can be created by .near kind of top level account. Illia.near can create now 123.illia.near, etc. It also means you deassociate the keys, right? The kind of the access from the account. What this allows us to do is actually a lot of really cool things. We can have multiple devices having different keys with different permissions. We can have a single use key that you can give to your friend to execute an action, and kind of it will only be used for that one single transaction, right? This can be to claim an NFT, join a DAO, maybe get a ticket for an event. You can have pretty much like less secure key management in the beginning when you don't have any value in your account, and then transition to more secure, hardware wallet or custody as you have more and more funds without needing to transfer and move all your kind of assets. And it's especially true when we talk about things like royalties and businesses, which actually have a continuous stream where you cannot actually change it later. We've been focused a lot on tooling, on SDKs and APIs, and so Near is kind of the only platform that supports both Solidity, Rust, and JavaScript smart contracts. So you can actually build in any of these languages. What's more, you can actually package the front end, like actual, like the UI that you show to users directly into smart contracts, which means you have a full app, fully on chain, unstoppable, kind of connected together. And this prevents a lot of security issues. This prevents availability issues. Somebody actually used it to DDoS some folks because it's an unstoppable platform for like websites. So that's already here. What's coming is a lot more tooling to make it even easier to onboard users. So again, I mentioned like users don't want to pay transaction fees per transaction. Like transaction, think of it as when you submit a form on any of the things, like, or you log in or whatever, you would need to pay a transaction fee in Web2. That just makes no sense. So the idea is with meta transactions, actually somebody else can pay for your transaction fees without you needing to actually spend money or have any money in the system first on. You can also have directly when you buying an NFT, a token, some experience, you can on that time on ramp and kind of transfer funds directly into where they're going, right? So it's in transaction on ramp. A really cool kind of next generation bridging is I call it remote accounts. This idea that as a user, if I have a Web3 wallet, any wallet, Bitcoin wallet, Ethereum wallet, Solana, Polygon, doesn't matter, and I want to use an app, right now you need to set up, first of all, figure out which chain that app is on, set up that wallet, bridge the assets, do something, and maybe bridge back, right? It's a very complex process, drops a lot of people. But actually, because you have a cryptographic wallet, that means we can actually cryptographically prove things on, for example, Near, that you have done, that you want to do something on Near without you needing to actually have a Near account. And so the idea is like, it's almost virtual accounts that are represented by like a special naming convention that can be mirroring your accounts in other networks. So what this will allow to do is pretty much remove this boundary that if you're a Ethereum user, you cannot use Near apps. You will, like pretty much anyone who has a self kind of hosted wallet will be able to use all of the apps, and with meta transactions kind of like interacting with all this like smooth. We're also really working on how do we advance security, right? I think everybody is constantly worried about securing the smart contracts, like is this application secure, is this token secure, all of those things. And so one of the things we want to launch is called Secure Sandbox, which allows to wrap your smart contract into a set of conditions. For example, amount of money can be moved per day, maybe some possibility based on other conditions. And so now you have kind of like way less risk when you're launching applications and allowing you to kind of iterate quicker. And finally, we wanted to introduce a user experience templates, right? Right now, Web3, everybody invents a new way of doing things. Everybody has a new way of showing the account, of, paying for transaction, like doing the transaction, buying NFT, etc. But, in Web2, we have Bootstrap, we have kind of material design, we have all this template kind of UX that's already being verified, that are also being familiar now to users. And so this is a way we want to introduce that and kind of get everybody to leverage it, obviously with your own design and skins to truly unify the experience and make it a lot smoother. So with all that, like the tooling is there, you have kind of data, you have command line interfaces, you have ways to actually build analytics and triggers and alarms around your smart contracts. And also, if you interested to learn more, there's near university and near academy to kind of actually get like some education. So the kind of I mentioned, we are doing remote accounts, and so one of the core pieces have been like, how do we communicate with other chains, right? And so there's bridges, and specifically near kind of ecosystem has been working on Rainbow Bridge, which is allowing a trustless verification of the other chain. What this means is that to break this bridge, you actually need to break one of the chain's consensus. And so that allows to have a very kind of, trustless and permissionless protocol that then everybody else can layer on things on top. And at the same time, we have ways for people I mentioned to run Solidity through Aurora, and you can run your own side chains like Cosmos or Polkadot type side chains with Octopus. Now, I want to stop for a second on JavaScript, right? JavaScript is the most popular language in the world, and it was not possible to build with it in Web3. And so we've been focused actually from the start, how can we make it possible? The problem is like you need to actually run a virtual machine of JavaScript on chain. That is expensive. And so to make this happen, the kind of team that works on compiler and kind of execution have optimized the runtime, I think like almost 10x to make this possible. And so now you can actually just ship dynamically JavaScript code into on-chain and execute it. And it has a full capability of JavaScript. So it's a quick.js machine. You can even combine the JavaScript with Rust smart contracts and create pretty much like plugins and modules, or you can submit a transaction which has JavaScript in it and executes it as part of the transaction. So you can have a lot kind of flexibility, more familiar with, if you're coming from building regular applications. So here's a quick example of, and there's no GIF. Well, no quick example, but it's npx create near app, select JavaScript, yarn deploy, and you have your smart contract on testnet and the front end spun up. And we have no GIFs whatsoever. So this was also an example of creating links that you can give to other people, which allow you to claim an NFT. So if you want to check it out, go to satori.art. You can actually create an NFT drop yourself that does not require your users to know about blockchain. You can literally just drop them links in instant messenger, email, Twitter, whatever. They'll click on them. That will like in the URL there is actually a private, like a single use private key that they can use to sign one transaction that claims the NFT into their account. And if they don't have an account, creates it. So that's kind of the onboarding flows you can create. And people have been like actually experimenting with this. Like you do multiple actions before you actually create an account. And so this way you can actually postpone kind of a more painful step, right, of creating an account and allow people to start getting some value out of the application. And another example of an absent GIF was how to build kind of a decentralized organizations with a lot of configurability, right? How do you actually go beyond just, organizing Discord, but actually have different groups and permissions for them. Now, switching gears, I mentioned we kind of focus on the ecosystem development. And so the big part of this has been, how do we scale this ecosystem? How do we fund it? And how do we do it in a sustainable way? And so Near Foundation has launched kind of an 800 million fund, which was designed to kind of across a variety of aspects to fund projects, startups, and efforts in the ecosystem. And kind of in a spirit of sharding, in a spirit of doing things in parallel, there has been set up a number of ecosystem funds which are focused on different aspects of the applications, ecosystem, and approaches, right? And so there's, for example, Human Guild was the first kind of nodes in this system is focused on gaming, right? They have kind of their own sub community where they work with game developers, helping them to kind of everything from talking economics to how to do marketing crypto, how to also talk with other founders and share the learnings, as well as like what is the tooling that they can share. You have proximity, which is doing very similar things on DeFi side, right? Helping applications that are building financial primitives to be successful in this. And so we kind of been launching this different vertical funds, which are, build expertise around specific domain, have funding to invest, and are able to kind of go out and also find really successful projects. So if you want to build something, this is a great place to actually connect, not just with capital, but also with expertise in that domain. On the flip side of this, we it's a like blockchains are global, and we have like I mean at this point probably every country represented almost across the ecosystem, but specifically there's a number of countries where the English is obviously not the first language for most of the world. The time zones are hard. The local presence is really important to actually build community, but also help projects to be successful there. And so it actually started in China, where I was living there, because China, different language, different kind of media, different everything. And so we've started to build out their local events and marketing. We did a product lab there. We did kind of a fund from there and kind of build out a whole kind of mini node of the near ecosystem that people know they can go to connect. And so since then, we've been scaling this across the world, trying to pretty much bring near across all of these local places. And it's been very successful program and kind of successful approach, because as we know, scaling, gives kind of a really, really good way to and faster way to do the adoption. Now, kind of one thing to highlight, right? So this is all, we've been talking about Web3, and there's a lot of very little users there, and very kind of, it's still very niche. And so the reality is actually it's not. So Sweatcoin is an application that has 120 million installs. They actually brought in 13 million users on Near, and they launched their token a week ago, or 10 days ago now. They're number one application in Web3 right now, with I don't know already, 300,000-400,000 users who are actively interacting with it daily. So the whole point here is we actually are here with mainstream adoption. This is users who have no idea what blockchain is. They have no idea how any of this works. They're just using the app, they're walking, they're getting rewarded, and they turning it into interactions with other applications. And so I think this is the approach which will kind of continue to scale up this ecosystem, is actually building experiences that hide blockchain in such a way, but then kind of impact users in a very direct way. And so kind of that's a showcase that we have now kind of for the whole ecosystem, what it will look like. And so if you are building anything or exploring how things should look like for mainstream adoption, they really build a kind of an interesting UX patterns. And part of the big reason why they chose Near is because they could do it in a very smooth way. So I have kind of I don't know, an ask, right? And I want to walk through an idea of how I see a lot of these things coming together, right? And the idea, how do we create without limits? How do we bring people to this? Because now we have the primitives, we have the kind of building blocks, we have infrastructure, and what you have now is ability to compose this in novel ways, right? This is something that Facebook offered it early on, where you could create a really interesting mashups of applications, and then they just closed all the APIs, and all of the people who are trying to do this were left without their business. Here, because of guarantees, because of the kind of blockchain, you have this ability to create kind of experiences that are composing finance and social, that are composing creativity and community, and that are allowing to curate content and actually kind of derive value from that, which I think is the solution to the discoverability problem we're having right now in Web2. So kind of I invite everyone to do this, and I'll walk you through a kind of a potential journey of a user, and to just like showcase what is possible to do right now. So the journey is, somebody receives a link, uh, that I showed you. They claim it and they get, a fishing rod NFT, which allows them to actually join a local community, right? In something like niche, to interact with other people around kind of who have this NFT and kind of in the local community like this, right? So at this point, they don't need to know about the blockchain. They don't need to know about the NFTs even, right? They just kind of receive a link, they click it as its invite link, they create an account and boom, they're in the local community, but it's actually enabled by this NFT gating. They can see a local curators, right? People who are curating content around, for example, fishing. This can be places where you can go and things like that, right? And through this following, they can not just see what they do for the fishing, they can actually start exploring in other places, like what are the apps they use across the ecosystem. And again, this is because the identity is shared, the kind of ability to interact with the user is not just limited to one app, but to the whole ecosystem. So for example, you find a really interesting music app, which allows you to listen and earn. And so you start exploring the kind of what is the music that's happening there. You find some of your other friends who are also like selecting really, long tail artists that you haven't heard of. And you find one of those artists really interesting and you go and you actually can invest directly into this artist through their DAO, right? You're able to interact directly with the artists, early on because they're kind of have an on-chain presence and it's not just a website and some social. You realize there's other DAOs around there and you start looking around and there's kind of all of these DAOs offer people to do some small tasks and bounties and you can kind of explore that and then you find through kind of your also fishing interests that there's a Save Ocean DAO. And so Save Ocean DAO, you can write content, you can do tasks, you can help people, um, you can help with different ways to engage with that. One of the things that the community recommends is actually a sustainability to earn app, right? It's something where if you are kind of buying in a grocery store, so going to restaurants that sustainably fish and source food and meat, you are, actually earning return, like earning some of the rewards from that. And so that allows you to actually kind of put, both your on one side your beliefs, on the other side, actually have an financial kind of motivation that gets you. And this is the idea that like what Sweatcoin is doing, they actually see a 20% improvement in how much people walk from their app, right? So this is a way to actually incentivize a mass change in the community. This links directly to your Near account, right? You can actually pay directly with Near or you with any stable coins on your Near account. There's a credit card issued. And so this is also something like Near Pay can be powering. Now you are kind of, for example, financial background. So you're like, hey, actually, there's a Safe Ocean DAO. They're great people, but they have a treasury, but they don't know how to manage it. They don't know how to deploy capital, and so you suggest them to actually run a private trading strategy specifically to invest in the efforts that are focused on saving ocean. And you don't want it to be revealed to everyone publicly, right? You don't want to run this on a public blockchain, so you spin up a private shard and actually execute it there. And this is example again, something where current blockchains are more like it's all about public acknowledgement of the state. And so with private shard, with kind of this technology, you can start building an interesting side applications that are still interacting with all the same public data and public DAO information. And I mentioned curation. I think curation is probably as I said, like one of the best ways to solve the discoverability problem. And so through that, you can actually like you can see who are interacting with your curated content and receive reputation, reward, whatever the way kind of the people want to incentivize to truly kind of expand that network. And yeah, inviting everyone to join their story at NearCon at next year's NearCon. So to just kind of in the conclusion, right? The idea is there's a robust and flexible technology, right? That's what we've been trying to build. We've been trying to build something that anybody can come in and not feel like they're limited by what by the technology itself. We've been focusing on developers and users, right? How do we make their experience truly kind of transcend what we got used to with blockchain and have as close to Web 2 as possible? And there's a lot of support system in the kind of that will help your project, your ideas to be successful as well, kind of engagement in the community and projects to join. So, we invite everyone to kind of create without limits. And this is really the core kind of our spirit. Like, how do we enable everyone to be a creator? All right, this is all for my talk, and let's have some questions. So our kind of base of the our blockchain is WebAssembly. WebAssembly is something that runs in every browser, it runs on every phone. It's something that developed by Google, Mozilla, Microsoft, and many other companies. And so what WebAssembly allows you to do is to run everything. You can run Python, Go, Rust, JavaScript, and Solidity EVM. For supporting specifically Solidity, what we've done, specifically Aurora, is they took EVM, the code base, and they put it as a smart contract on Near. So the idea is you can take other blockchains, you can even take Bitcoin, for example, and make it a smart contract on Near because it's so flexible. Similarly, JavaScript is a QuickJS VM, like the virtual machine of JavaScript, actually plugged in into the blockchain. So that's why kind of the basis of our platform is allowing you to run anything you want. And like people are prototyping Python and trying other things as well. On the security side, it's a very important question, and specifically the way it works is, in a way, it's through taxation, right? Through inflation of rewards that are distributed to validators. But the actual underlying mechanism is taxation of all the assets that are sitting on blockchain. Yeah, so that was my point that, like, I don't believe that a approach of splitting layers, right, will win kind of in the long term, because this is the same as having kind of a lot of, you have a lot of hardware and you need to put your own computer, and you're trying to figure out how to do it, and like it will always limit what is the audience that actually will be working with that. Versus, you just pick up a Mac that has everything integrated, works faster, works better, and you just use it. Like that's a kind of core idea, is like the what roll-ups and all these approaches are in a way like a lot of different people kind of innovating in parallel, but it creates like this huge space of different components, right, that now you as user need to understand. Versus like here's already working system that have everything, is fast, and kind of delivers on all of the needs, so can be just used. All right. Yeah, so that's already happening right now. So the way kind of it is done right now, and it will be a little bit different later, is there is a kind of mapping of account to shard, to physical shard. The mapping right now is actually because one of the core points of Near is that any contract can actually get up to a full chain of capacity. Let's say you build something really successful, right? CryptoKitties, which was 2017 example. Right now, it can be Sweatcoin, right? you don't want to be stuck with other applications. Other applications don't want to be stuck with you. It's the same as like, you know, you go to Amazon, you want to sometimes a dedicated computer or you doing a shared computer. So Near allows to actually pull the contracts into a dedicated shard. And right now this is done through governance. So Aurora actually has its own dedicated shard. Probably Svetcoin will get a dedicated shard as well. And so there's a routing table pretty much that says if the account name is this, go to this shard. And then for the rest, it's kind of right now randomly distributed with a deterministic pattern. Now, with dynamic resharding, one of the core ideas will be to actually build a more sophisticated routing, but this routing is available in every node. So there's a kind of a routing table pretty much available that anybody know, like everybody knows where on other shards is specific contracts. For sure, yeah. So there are a few things we're doing. First of all, we're getting apps like Sweatcoin, which onboard massive amounts of users, right? We're partnering with folks like Brave, which have, you know, whatever, 60 million users or more now as well. And pretty much how do we make experience for them that is nicer, that they don't need to think about, again, blockchain. They're already receiving some BAT, et cetera. So this is like onboarding funnel. We also partner with Coinbase, for example, for Coinbase Earn and a few other partners like this who are kind of more about educating people about blockchain and whether they are. So I think like from our perspective, it's what are the applications and kind of who already either have users or can grow their user base massively. How do we partner with them? And also what are the places where there's a lot of users who are interested, right? Who have latent interest, and how do we kind of bring education to them? Yeah, so this is a really interesting question. So Sweatcoin actually, before they launched their coin, which was 10 days ago, they've been a profitable business. So they were kind of distributing not a coin, it was like essentially like a loyalty points. And then these loyalty points could be converted into discounts for different products. And so they were and they still have the business with different brands to offer to this audience products. So they actually have a business model. And so the question now, how does they scale it up with the crypto economy? And there's like a lot of ideas how that should kind of work. But like in general, the core here is like when you have hundreds of millions of users and you can offer them something valuable and you have, especially like, for example, walking data, you can actually, for example, provide insurance. You can provide kind of a lot more to like, you know, connect them to brand like Nike for the shoes and stuff like this. So there's a lot of economy around this you can build, which will support this kind of almost user acquisition cost of bringing users and kind of maintaining them. I think the for specific domains, right? If like listen to earn, you know, sustainability to earn, etc. For each one, you kind of need to figure out what's the business model will be. It's definitely not true that you can say like X to earn and it works. That's for sure not true. But you know, for sustainability, maybe you know, UN is actually spending insane amount of money on this, right? Are they targeting them directly, right? Right. Maybe this way, you know, through actually incentivizing a little bit different behavior changes in people is a better way to spend this money, right? So again, can we use this pools of money that exists in a more targeted way? And so that I think is an interesting experiment to think about. Again, like for listen to earn, like what is the current business models for music? Like, you know, a lot of them are broken. Like what are the things you need to change and how the money will flow? Is there curators that can actually create a better like presence, et cetera, et cetera. And so through that, you can actually kind of figure out business models. Yeah, so there's a project called Decentral Bank that in your ecosystem building a stable coin. Indeed, they had an interesting model around kind of trying to balance reserve with some algorithms. They actually have unlaunched that, and as far as I know, going to be releasing a new version, kind of more robust version in coming weeks. Kind of for me, generally, I see stablecoin as one of the primitives, right? A key building block, and without kind of a stablecoin that runs the system, like you most users don't want to spend the volatile assets, right? You kind of the volatile asset is more for a either value capture or for kind of active participation like staking, not for unit of account and kind of unit of exchange. And so stablecoin is extremely important, although yes, it's been a very rough ride in general for stablecoins lately. So I think like we see that, I mean, and to be clear, like I'm from Ukraine, for example, dollar bills is something that's like a way more circulating actually than here. Like actual physical dollar bills of US dollars are more circulating than I've seen in US, because the local currency is shit. And so you need some unit of account that's like stable. And so actually stablecoins solve that problem, for kind of all of those countries way better than having a physical dollar bill. So yeah. For sure, yeah. So I'll start with validator because it's way simpler. So we just had incentivized testnet over past 2 months and up until like a few weeks ago to test the new release, right? This chunk only producers. And so within that, that was almost like a training boot camp for validators to figure out how to run nodes, how to participate, and also test the hell out of the whole blockchain, right? So we had 1,500 participants, and so 200 of them going to be getting on mainnet, and through a liquid staking providers that exist in the ecosystem, they actually will get like some of the initial delegation to start running nodes. So I think kind of we already have almost like a community that can self-propel, and there's more like slots. Like pretty much the nearest approach here is the more demand the network have, the more shards we'll have, the more shards we'll have, the more validators we need, right? And so there's actually a very natural growth of validators as network becomes more used. So I think that part is pretty straightforward. There's a lot of people who want to run validators. Developers is very interesting. Developers, there's almost like three different categories, right? There's existing Web3 developers who are already familiar with some stack, and that's why kind of Near offers pretty wide variety of stacks. There's a Web2 developers who don't know about anything about Web3. They're really hard to target because they don't care. And there's a really interesting kind of side of people, which are people who are curious in Web3 but are not doing anything. This is where JavaScript comes in. JavaScript is something which removes all the barriers to entry. It's like as easy as set up an XJS or React JX app, and you have a full app working in 15 seconds. And so we just announced actually Free Code Camp partnership to educate the developers how to build JavaScript applications on there. So this is, I think, the main approach to grow kind of the developer base, and also see a lot more experiments in kind of ways people will use blockchain, right? Because it's also not everyone will start a company, but you can on a weekend just hack something together and throw it up and see like if people like it, right? This is where also like some of the security side comes in, like how do we wrap potentially JavaScript is not always the most secure language. How do we wrap that and kind of secure those in bundles in the sandboxes? So that's an interesting question that I think our governance body will need to discuss. It's definitely true that paying transaction fees in a volatile asset is also seems weird. Um, Although there's some economic reasons for doing that. I think meta transactions, they enable to pay with anything, right? So like Sweatcoin, for example, they want their users to pay with Sweatcoin because they may not have Near yet, right? And so the idea to allow to pay with anything or not pay at all because application funds it. or you have a subscription model where you literally paid, $10 a month, for example, and just use whatever up to 1,000 transactions per month, right? Stuff like this. You can have any model you want. Like managed transactions just allow you to do this as a pipe. Okay. Any more questions? We solved it. Now you know all about blockchain now. Yeah, so this is already available. Like you can sign up with email, you can sign up with Google. So you can have like kind of more custodial or semi-custodial solutions. And then because Near allows you to rotate keys, you can have you can claim your account later, delete the key that potentially is controlled by Google and add a key that you have. And like from a user perspective, literally just authenticating different ways of and logging into your account, right? Similar how you have like different login like social logins and different applications. So the idea is here kind of let's go away from like seed phrases and go closer to like devices and parties who can help you log in into your apps. And so there's like you can even have, for example, a bank which has a recovery key on your account. So they cannot control your assets. They can only recover a key with some delay. And so they, based on the KYC, for example, they do this, right? This is an option. You can have this with friends. You can have like 5 friends. If they, 3 of them together confirm, then you can also recover a key. So you can have all the different options on Near right now. Like this is all possible. And already a bunch of people trying different things, right? 2FA, log in with email, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, well, thanks everyone. I'll be outside as well, and there's Cameron from Banyan team from near US. So